So in this video, I'm going to be talking about Molly Bang's concepts that can be found in her text, Picture This, How Pictures Work. And we're also going to be talking about our paper number 1 assignment, the Picturebook project. You might want to print out the assignment sheet that can be found below this video on our Canvas website. The top of it looks like this. At the beginning, it has Molly Bang's principles that you can use for the Picturebook picture that you create. And it might be helpful as we're going through these to kind of recognize how these different theories that she has works with an actual picture that she's presenting to us. I'm going to apologize up front. This video is probably going to be a little bit longer than we usually have, so feel free to, stop halfway through the video, whatever you need to do to take care of you, resume it later. But these concepts are really important, so it's really important that you get this information and get it in a way that is best appropriate to the way that you learn. So I want to give you a very quick overview of the assignment that we're going to have, because I think that will help you kind of understand what we're talking about a little bit more throughout our presentation, and you can start thinking about what you're going to do for your own assignment. However, I do want to remind you that all of the assignment details can be found on this page, but it can also be found on that assignment overview sheet that I have given to you, and that is at the bottom of this video. So very quickly, you are going to pick a well-known fairy tale, nursery rhyme, or folk tale. And what you're going to be doing for the picture part of this, so you're going to be creating a picture, you're going to recreate one specific moment from that story using geometric shapes. So we're going to see 2 different moments from the Little Red Riding Hood story today. So keep that in mind. You're not trying to tell the whole story, you're just trying to tell one very specific moment. Something that is really important when you're thinking about that from very early on is you need to decide what feeling you want to convey with your picture. Are you trying to show fear? Are you trying to show excitement? That's really going to impact the way that you create your picture, so you need to have a really clear idea from the very beginning. And then after you've created your picture, you're going to write a 1.5 to 2 page paper to accompany it. And it's going to tell you in part 2 on this assignment at the bottom exactly what is expected to go into that essay. So we're going to be focusing on the Little Red Riding Hood story today, and Molly Bang's book goes over a couple of different scenes from this story and gives a couple of moments and how she creates those moments and the way that these moments with these geometrical shapes can evoke the same emotion that the actual story would. So we've got a red triangle here, and you may have guessed already that this is supposed to represent Little Red Riding Hood. And Molly Bang talks about how this triangle isn't huggable, or you wouldn't want to caress this because it has the different points on it. And she also talks about, which this goes along with point number 1 on our assignment sheet, that it feels stable. The triangle feels stable because it has a flat, wide, horizontal base. So it's not sitting on one of its ends, it's not tilting in any way, so this character still feels very stable. She also talks about the color of the triangle, and she talks about that red is a really warm color, and it kind of gives off this feeling of being bold and flashy. So the feelings that we have about the shape and the background information that we have and we bring to this shape are then also applied to the character of Red Riding Hood herself. So then the moment that Bang decides to depict is a moment with Little Red Riding Hood and her mother. So she adds in a larger triangle, which she wants to use to represent the mother. However, she points out that if the mother is another large triangle, the mother becomes the focus because she's so much larger than Little Red Riding Hood. but also the shape implies the mother, who is really warm and strong and vital, that she's overbearing and also decidedly not huggable. So because she has these points, she doesn't seem motherly to Molly Bang. So Bang tries something different. She keeps the triangle shape and the size the same, but she decides to round off the corners. And by rounding off the corners, she says that it seems to make the mother softer. So you can see this theory in number 7 on your handout. And it talks about, in the second half, it talks about that we feel more secure or comforted looking at rounded shapes or curves. So we might think about how a motherly figure, especially in the story of Little Red Riding Hood, we would want to feel as though she was comforting and a secure person that Little Red could trust. However, she talks about that because it is so large and so red that it's still drawing attention away from Little Red, so it's not quite perfect yet. So Bang makes another change. She decides to make the mother a paler purple color. And she says that if we make it a paler color, that they become more equal in prominence. It's not so bright and glaring as the red color. Also, because it's a pale purple, red is still in the same color family, so there's a linkage between the mother and red still. She also adds a black basket in the middle, that half moon shape that's black. And she says that the black basket draws attention to the middle and to what's going on in the story. It gives us a sense that there is something actually happening in the story. And as we know, this is connected to that moment when the mother tells Little Red Riding Hood that she needs to go to grandmother's house to help her get better. So I want us to look at one more example from Bang's book that talks about the same story, Little Red Riding Hood. And we're going to go through a range of different possibilities and different things that she plays with to make the picture just right. And this is something that I really want you to try to do when you're working on your own picture book project, is really experiment in different ways of how different things and how different placements and colors and shapes on the page create a different feeling and a different effect. So the moment that we're going to look at now is the moment when Little Red Riding Hood is going through the forest and the big bad wolf sees her from afar. So Bang first starts out with these black triangles, which she's trying to create trees for the forest. But she says that these are too close in shape as Red herself, so we might mistake that these are actually, humans as well. So instead she tries stacking triangles on top of each other to create more of a tree-like look. But she talks about how this may imply that Red is actually turning into trees, which we do not want. So we need to have some type of contrast between Red and the trees. So if you look at number 10, it says that we notice contrasts, or put in another way, contrast enables us to see. So we need to figure out a way to differentiate very clearly for our audience that Red is the triangle where something else is representative of the trees. So instead she settles on portraying tree trunks. And this gives this idea that the trees are really, really large. And if we give them different sizes and different lengths, it gives this idea of some depth to the forest. And that different trees are closer to the foreground and there's other trees in the background as well. The other thing is that Bang says that vertical shapes are more exciting and more active. Vertical shapes rebel against the Earth's gravity. They imply energy and a reaching toward heights or the heavens. So this really, and this is number 2 on your handout, this really gives us this idea that these trees are really, really tall and they might be really, really, imposing on Red if we put her in this scene. All right, so then Bang puts what we presume to be Red in the actual picture. And she says that having her partly covered by the trees makes her to belong and be inside the woods. So it looks like she's in amongst the trees and she's walking through the forest. However, she talks about that the picture should be scarier than this. Right now it's not very scary. It looks like she's just walking through the forest. So we need to amp it up the scary factor. So she changes the size and makes Little Red a little bit smaller, and it makes it feel somewhat scarier. And she talks about that we feel more scared when we are little and the attacker is big because we're less able to overcome the danger or control it physically. The other thing that we might think about here is number 8. The larger an object is in the picture, the stronger it feels. So if we feel smaller, we feel like we're more defenseless. So she makes it just a little bit smaller, and she says that reducing this size makes her seem even more overwhelmed by the trees, because if you think about that the tree trunk itself is that big and Little Red is that small, these trees are really, really huge, and this forest is probably not somewhere that I want to be. However, she says that we need to make room for the wolf. So not only is she thinking about the impact and the feeling that this picture is creating for the audience, she's also thinking about what are the main items that we need to have in our picture to make it really clear to the audience what moment this is and what story it is. However, all the while, she's still really just relying on geometric shapes. None of this is representational. All right, so in an effort to make room for the wolf, she moves her farther away into the foreground. However, she says that if we move Little Red farther away, it's not as scary, because if we move her farther away, she's more distant from the viewer, and we don't identify with her as much because she's so much farther away from us. And we don't sympathize with her, which, as you know from the story, we need to root for our heroine, Little Red. So she says, rather than distance making the heart grow stronger, in picture books, distance makes the heart grow colder. But again, we have to make room for the wolf. And so how do we do this? How do we make it so that we connect with Little Red, but also have enough space in the picture to include the wolf? So what she does is she slants some of the trunks to make them diagonal. So this goes with number 3 on your handout. Diagonal shapes are dynamic because they imply motion and tension. It looks like one of these or 2 of these trees are going to fall over on Little Red Riding Hood. So that gives us this idea that there's some anxiety and we're a little bit concerned for Little Red and what's going to happen to her. She also talks about that shapes that lean toward the protagonist feel as though they're blocking or stopping the forward movement or progress, whereas shapes that are leaning away give the impression of opening up space or leading the protagonist forward. We can see with this tree diagonal, it looks like it's stopping her progress or is going to potentially crush her. So we've got our readers to feel a little bit more empathy and connect with Red more because she's in a dangerous situation. So the next thing that we need to add is the wolf. And she poses this idea of why do the triangles feel so scary the way that they're created? Why not choose something different? So she talks about that these triangles specifically are leaning towards the left, towards Little Red, so it looks like she's the one in danger. And also because of the background context that we have. We know that the way that these triangles are put together, that they're supposed to represent a wolf. And mostly because they're so pointy, sharp, dark, and big. So she plays around with the size a little bit and makes the wolf a little bit smaller. But as you can see, this definitely, when we make the wolf smaller, it's not as scary. It's also not as scary if we round the edges. He kind of looks like a dinosaur. She then also changes the color of the wolf. And if we make the wolf a paler color, he's not as scary there either. The purple colored wolf is a bit disturbing too because remember before we associated that pale purple color with the mother. And if we think about the linkage that we talked about earlier, if we're associating the big bad wolf with the loving, caring mother, that's really not something that we want to do in the context of this story. We don't want to have a connection between the mother and the wolf. So she goes back to her original decision of the black, pointy, large triangles. Then she talks about that she needs to add some details to make this figure more wolf-like. However, she talks about that when she adds more wolf details, this unknown menace, we don't quite know, we think it's a wolf, but it could be something else, I'm not sure what. But when it becomes specific, it becomes a little slightly less scary. But the story requires a wolf, so she has to figure out how to do that. So she decides to settle on some teeth and add in teeth. And while real life wolves are rounded at the snout and teeth, when we are scared in a situation, we see the scary elements in an exaggerated light. And so when we want a picture to be scary, it's more effective to graphically exaggerate the scary aspects rather than to portray them as specifically as they actually would look like in real life. So you might think about this when you have seen a movie or a show and there's a scary part that comes on and the director chooses, instead of actually showing what happens in that moment, they instead show these really big exaggerated shadows. It kind of creates the same effect. Your mind can create as scary of a moment as you want. But if you were given the specific thing that happened, you would know exactly the range of scariness that that moment created. So it gives the reader a little bit more agency to make it as scary as they possibly could. So next she decides that she needs to add some type of eye to this creature as well, so it stands out a little bit away from the trees. She tries to use purple, but she says that the color isn't quite right for this moment. Again, it kind of connects back to the mother, and it also just looks a little bit weird in this picture. But she talks about the shape, specifically this diamond shape, really emphasizes the pointiness of a real wolf's eye. And remember that pointy features are a little bit more scary for a reader to look at, whereas with a rounded feature, that's more comforting to us. And this goes back to number 7 on your handout. So then she tries to change not only the color of the eye, but also the shape. And she talks about that this kind of makes the wolf look a little goofy, or like he's maybe a little bit happy. So it's not as menacing as before with the diamond. So she feels like this triangle feature is not working in this particular instance. So this kind of goes back to that idea of that you really have to work with different shapes and objects and try different things when you're trying to figure out your picture, because not everything is going to have the same effect that you might think that it does. Just because a triangle has pointy sides, if you actually put it on the wolf, it looks goofy and the wolf actually looks like he's happy and it's not as scary. I kind of want to be friends with that wolf because he just seems like he would be lots of fun. That's not what we as the reader need to feel about the wolf. We need to feel like he's a serious, scary character. The other thing that she points out is now there's 2 triangles, right? And it looks almost like Little Red Riding Hood is inside the eye of the wolf, and that's too closely associated for Bang. And she thinks that this makes the wolf and the Little Red too closely associated with one another. So this is what she settles on. She goes back to the diamond shape, but she settles on making red the eye of the wolf. She talks about that purple, which was what her first choice was, is a milder, less aggressive color than red. However, because the colors are still the same between red and the wolf, we associate them together. So there's still some linkage like it talks about in number 9. However, it looks like now, since we've kind of got the diamond pointing towards red, it looks like the wolf is looking at her like he sees her as prey. So then she goes on to add a tongue to the wolf, and she says that now it looks as though red is being drawn right into the wolf's mouth, and it creates a gravitational effect here is what she says. She says that the larger the mass of color, the more our attention is drawn to it. So this is similar to number 8. The larger an object is in a picture, the stronger that it feels. Also, she says that we're more attracted to the wolf now than the trees. The wolf breaks through the verticals, so it's going across the verticals, and also because the wolf is to the far right of the picture, and our eyes tend to go from left to right on the page the way that we read. So she makes one final adjustment to this picture. She makes the background a pale purple color. And she talks about that this purple in this specific picture implies that it's nighttime. It doesn't quite give off that mother vibe because we can tell that this is the idea that it's nighttime. Or the approach of night. And for us, night feels scarier than day because we can see well during the day and poorly at night. She also talks about that darker backgrounds can imply a storm or overcast weather, and neither of which feels as sunny as a day of sunshine. So be thinking about that too when you're creating your own picture. What color are you going to have as the background, and how is that color going to impact the overall mood or feeling that you want to create in your picture? And make sure that if you're creating something that's happy and an exciting moment, that you're not using a darker color that would maybe create this idea of scary storm overcast weather. This whole concept goes with number 6, which says that white or light backgrounds feel safer to us than dark backgrounds because, again, we can see well during the day and only poorly at night. So that gives us some background context there, is that's something that we maybe have been associating with since we were little children, that darkness and nighttime is sometimes scarier than daytime when you can see that there are no boogie monsters under the bed. So she does one more thing here, and she adds a pop of color, white, to the teeth, so it makes it stand out more. And so those pointy features on the wolf are seen a lot easier because they pop out off of the page.
So I want to talk more about this assignment of picture your paper number 1, which is based off of the concepts that Molly Bang talks about in her book Picture This, which are above and what we just talked about a little bit ago. So the following materials, the 2 paragraphs that we're going to go over, will comprise the first stage of your picture project, which will eventually be worth 20% of your final grade. So this is going to be our first step, and then when I give you feedback, there will be an extension of your paper, and then you're also going to be revising your picture and creating a new picture from the feedback that I have given you. And once you've revised, then you'll get a final grade. So part 1 of this project, and really where you need to start in your project process, is creating the picture. So you're concentrating only on one moment from a fable, fairy tale, or nursery rhyme that you need to choose. And you need to create an illustration in which you use only geometrical shapes or symbols and no more than 4 colors, including the background. So you should decide early in the process what feeling you want to convey through your picture. So figure out what that specific moment is. Is it the moment when the wolf sees Little Red in the forest? Or is it the moment where Cinderella loses her glass slipper running away from the ball? And then you need to decide how to use geometrical shapes to create that moment, and also figure out what type of feeling you want to convey with this. And I should put up front that you cannot use Little Red Riding Hood, since we used that for an example. So a bit more continuation about part 1. Do not be representational. I do not want a very specific image of a wolf. I want you to follow the abstract style that Bang uses in her depiction of Little Red Riding Hood, where the triangle represents the heroine rather than actually creating a body. If you do be representational, that's going to totally hurt your grade. So please don't do that, okay? This is not what this assignment is about, to be representational. You want to be very abstract. Another thing is, do not write words on your picture. You should not need to identify for me in the picture who what character is. You will explain that within your paper. And for this assignment, even though we are distance learning, I would prefer that you use construction paper because it allows you to experiment with the different sizes, shapes, colors, and arrangements before you fix it in place with your picture elements, much like Bang did throughout her experimentation with the Little Red Riding Hood in the forest. Then, after you have decided how your picture is going to look, you can scan your final picture and upload it to the Canvas assignment. If you want to use another method, you don't have access to construction paper, or there's not a way for you to scan it into a PDF, and you would like to use another method, example is a Word document, please clear it with me first via email. You need to get my permission first. The thing about construction paper is, though, the more you experiment, the more that you will learn. So the more that you can move it around physically with your hands, the more that you're going to learn about this process and how different theories that you apply to your picture from Bang change the different ways that we understand the picture and the feeling that it creates. Another thing that I should say about clearing a different method with me first, please do not do that the night before it is due. You need to quickly decide what method you're going to be using if it's different from construction paper, and email me ASAP. I do not expect to get any emails any later than a week before our first draft due date for this specific thing. So please decide very quickly and then let me know if you have a different idea of how you would like to create your picture or a method that you would like to use. So part 2 of this project is the essay, and this should be a typed double-spaced 12-point font Times New Roman commentary of around 1.5 to 2 pages. At the minimum, it needs to be 1.5 pages, and I would prefer that you don't go too much over 2 pages. And this should go along with your picture, so both of those need to be uploaded to our Canvas site. In that essay, you should identify specifically what folk, fairy tale, or rhyme you're working with, and explain exactly which moment you are depicting and what feeling or effect you want to evoke in your reader. So this should kind of give you an idea of the type of thing that you're doing when you decide what story you want to go with, and specifically think about what moment you're depicting and the feeling or the effect that you want that moment to convey. Next, in your essay, you need to detail how you experimented while making your picture. How did you move things around? How did you decide where to place it depending on the mood that it affect? What turned out to be the most challenging about this process? What things hung you up, or things that made it more difficult to figure out where to place something? And then you need to discuss 2 Bang principles, those that were listed at the top of this sheet. And I only want you to cover 2 right now, and talk about how those best apply to your final picture, and quote from the language of the principles as you discuss them. So specifically the language that is above for you to use. So I want to give you a little bit more information about what I'm looking for as far as using Bang's language to support what you used in your own picture. So if you're applying the 3rd principle to your picture, I don't want you to just refer to number 3. Instead, you should explain that, as Molly Bang writes, diagonal shapes are dynamic because they imply motion or tension, and then include the page number that this occurs on, which is page 46 in Bang's Picture This. You should be using Bang's exact language, and be sure to include quotation marks around that language. Then, after you've included the quote from Bang, you need to show how you've applied the principle in your picture. Your essay, in total, should 1. Demonstrate knowledge of Bang's picture theory, so that you have an understanding of how these different theories work, and then also provide a rationale for your approach. And lastly, it should help your reader see the effort that you've put into the project and what you've learned from the process overall. So not only is this a bit of an analysis of your own picture, but it's also a reflection of the process that you went through to create this picture.